Part 46. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 469. Go to Yin Yang Cave. Su Tong and Gao Zhou looked at each other. The old man's suggestion did not conflict with their goals, but Su Tong still had to think about it. Gao Zhou tentatively said, "Old man, you are going to Yin Yang Cave. We can actually cooperate. We are not planning anything, we just go inside." Before he finished speaking, he was interrupted by the old man's sneer, "Don't talk nonsense. I don't know what you are thinking. Over the years, how many foreigners have wanted to compete for the position of high priest? Don't think that I don't know. Several people have entered the mountain before. When they disappeared, weren't they heading towards our family's holy place? Oh, you mean, besides us, there are others?" Su Tong raised his eyebrows slightly, pretending to be surprised. The old man had a look on his face as if he had seen through them already, and smiled without saying a word. "We can protect you from entering the mountain, but, the poison on our bodies." Gao Zhou pointed to his belly. The old man seemed to be waiting for Gao Zhou's words. He took out a square box from the satchel behind him. After opening it, he saw a dried toad inside, but the skin of the toad was still stained. "There is a large piece of something that looks like a pearl." When Gao Zhou saw this, his face and mouth twitched a few times, and his eyebrows were knitted together. "This is what we eat. When I think about it, the texture of this thing is so chewy and juicy, and sweet in the mouth. When I was eating by myself, I picked out these little pearls to eat. At that time, I thought they were simply delicacies in the world. Now that I found out that this thing was actually on the toad's back, I couldn't help but push the door open, stick my head out, lie down at the door and vomit." The old man pointed at the toad and explained to the two of them proudly, "Although our family has failed, the things passed down by our ancestors are still there. This is the toad. I have raised it since I was a child. I feed it with blood every day. After 30 years, an egg is laid on the back, and the thing dies." After saying that, he opened his clothes and exposed his chest. Su Tong and Gao Zhou were surprised to find that the skin on the old man's chest was as wrinkled and sticky as a toad's skin. "If you eat this egg, our lives are connected. If I die, the contents in your stomach will eat up your internal organs completely, leaving nothing behind." Gao Zhou was stunned for a second, and almost rushed forward to fight the old man. "Old man, do you believe it or not that I will make your life worse than death? Ouch, uncle, I was wrong." The harsh words only lasted a second, and Gao Zhou rushed to the street in an instant. Obviously, there are many ways to make the old man's life worse than death, but before that, he can also make Gao Zhou's life worse than death. The old man squinted his eyes and ignored Gao Zhou, who was lying on the ground, holding his stomach and rolling around. He took out a small pipe and put it to his mouth. Su Tong had already rolled the tobacco and stuffed it into the pot. He took out a piece of red-hot charcoal from the iron stove and lit it for the old man. The tobacco in the pot flickered. The old man took a deep puff and then said to Su Tong, "Xiao Su, I know you are not ordinary people. I am no match for you, uncle. I don't care what you ask for. Protect me into the mountains. I will naturally give you the antidote when the matter is completed. Yes, Ginger is still too old. We are scared. I guarantee that you will have no problem entering the mountain. I also hope that you will keep your word." Su Tong surrendered obediently, which made the old man very satisfied, but Su Tong's next words made the old man's expression suddenly change. He casually threw the charcoal in his hand into the iron stove. The face in the firelight was flickering, and the half-smiling expression made the old man feel a little frightened. Su Tong smiled unhurriedly and said, "If you don't get it by then, I'll go find your granddaughter to get the antidote." As soon as these words came out, the smile on the old man's face gradually stiffened. The two looked at each other silently for a moment, then suddenly burst into laughter at the same time. They are all smart people, and only by restricting each other and cooperating can we continue to move forward. The old man didn't see any movement, and Gaozhou, who was lying on the ground, didn't feel that much pain in his stomach. Sitting aside with a look of displeasure on his face, he felt extremely depressed. He was considered a half-step master, but he was manipulated by an ordinary old man. His mentality was about to explode. Seeing his depressed expression, Su Tong sneered and said, "You deserve it? I'll remind you that there are too many things in this world that we don't know." This was actually said to myself. Although I didn't understand the principles of goo insects, I could easily figure out Gaozhou and Changwuja. This shows that even if they are great masters, they are not invincible in reality. What about him? Who is this guy? Gaozhou kicked Chang Wuhen, who was crawling on the ground, and asked Su Tong. Su Tong looked at Chang Wuju, who was lying on the ground with dark circles under his eyes, and couldn't help but said with a bad smile, "That's my brother." After saying that, he sat next to the campfire, found a comfortable position, smoked a hookah and took a nap. It seemed that he had no intention of helping this brother up from the ground. In the end, the old man was really worried that the guy was lying on the ground, suffering from cold symptoms, which would affect their speed into the mountain, so he let Gaozhou help him up and throw him on the small table aside to crawl. Early the next morning, before dawn, there was a rustle of footsteps in the forest. Even if it hasn't snowed yet in the mountains and forests in winter, it's already so cold that people can shiver all over. Su Tong and the others were fine, but the old man had to tighten his clothes. "Old man, there's one thing I don't understand. Don't they all say that voodoo can't be passed on to men? Why do you know how to voodoo?" Su Tong remembered that in the script world, it was said that voodoo was passed on to women but not to men, and couldn't help but ask the old man. The old man did not deny this. He held a walking stick in one hand and carefully followed Su Tong's footsteps while the other hand was supported by Gaozhou. As for Chang Wuju, he carried the red coffin on his back and followed behind with an annoyed look on his face. The reason why he was carrying this heavy coffin was precisely because of Su Tong's words, "My brother is born with supernatural powers." So this glorious task naturally fell on Chang Wuju. Every step Chang Wuhen took, he never forgot to glare at Su Tong. If looks could kill, Su Tong would have been cut into pieces at this moment. "Humph, you know a lot, but do you know why it's a female but not a male?" "I don't know that." The old man was in a good mood, so he explained it to Su Tong and Gaozhou. "Because the voodoo technique is passed down to women, women will eventually get married. One generation after another, the voodoo technique will be slowly dispersed. If the voodoo technique is learned by men, it will be passed down from generation to generation, and then the voodoo technique will be used. Become powerful and even use voodoo to control everyone, just like Gaozhou and Changwuja, who are enslaved at this moment." The four of them didn't talk much on the way. By noon, they had already climbed 2 mountains. The old man felt more and more guilty as he walked. He knew that Su Tong and the others were not ordinary people. But after walking so far, even an old hunter like myself felt weak from walking, and these 3 people couldn't even breathe. What's more, the one at the back was carrying a coffin filled with sacrifices. What kind of monsters are these 3 guys? However, although the old man felt weak, he was still very confident in his own voodoo technique. This was a voodoo technique passed down from his ancestors. Even the most powerful person would be controlled. Only. Boom. Just as he was thinking about it, Chang Wugu, who was behind him, suddenly put down the coffin and said with an unhappy look on his face, "I'm not leaving, I'm tired, I want to eat." When Su Tong saw this, he casually took out a sesame seed cake and threw it to him, but Chang Wuzu slapped him and flew it away. He glared at Su Tong with angry eyes that wanted to tear Su Tong into pieces. "Sooner or later, I will use this screwdriver to stab you to death with my own hands. Chang Wogu took out the screwdriver again at some unknown time, wishing he could use it to poke holes in Su Tong's body right now. Gao Zhou looked at Su Tong with a speechless expression, only to find that Su Tong had an indifferent expression on his face, completely ignoring the unusual and unrestrained threat. Okay, let's take a rest. Our speed today is good. At this speed, we can get there tomorrow afternoon. The old man observed his words and gestured for everyone to take a rest. The four of them found a place leeward. Gao Zhou was responsible for building a temporary hut out of trees, and Su Tong was responsible for lighting the fire. As for Chang Wuhan, after putting down the coffin, he rushed into the woods as fast as an ape, like an ape. Off to find tonight's prey. As for the old man, he was so tired that he lay down to rest. After a while, he could still hear the old man snoring. "Boss, is this really your brother?" Gao Zhou took advantage of Chang Wuji's absence and asked Su Tong. "Yes, we have been good brothers who we have played with since childhood." Su Tong lit a bonfire, nodded and said. Gao Zhou looked confused. "Then you put a hat on him, or you have a grudge against him for killing his father? Why does this kid want to tear you apart?" Su Tong raised his head and looked at the sky, and seemed to think for a moment before explaining, "The murder of his father is not counted, and he didn't have time to find a girlfriend. Where did the cuckold come from? Oh, it should be regarded as the murder of his son. Take revenge. Oh, you killed his son, eh? That's not right, doesn't he have a wife?" Gao Zhou wanted to ask again, but Su Tong suddenly covered his mouth, raised his ears and listened carefully, and looked sideways at the woods not far away. "Someone, hide." As he spoke, he rolled up a piece of dirt on the ground and extinguished the charcoal fire. He picked up the coffin and jumped into the bushes. Gao Zhou did not wait for the old man to wake up, put the old man on his shoulders, and hid in the grass closely behind him. After a while, I saw a group of people walking out of the woods. There were men and women, carrying baskets full of things behind them. Strangely, they were also carrying a red coffin. At this time, Su Tong noticed that there were several Han Chinese in ordinary clothes behind him. Judging from the way they walked and their energetic appearance, Su Tong could basically conclude that these people were all extraordinary people with special abilities. It seemed that what the old man said was true. It seemed that they were not the only ones entering the mountain this time. Su Tong was thinking in his heart, could it be that they didn't read the almanac when they went out, so how could they encounter such a mess when they went down to Yin Yang Cave? Len Buting saw a figure behind him, and his eyes immediately popped out, and he couldn't help but curse in his heart, why are these old ladies joining in the fun here? Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 470. I saw several Miao women walking behind, chatting and laughing. Su Tong didn't recognize the others, but only the one walking among them, wearing Miao clothes and a silver ring on her head, smiled. Su Tong recognized that graceful figure with a strand of broken hair floating across his forehead at a glance. If this wasn't my lost master's wife, who could she be? Speaking of which, this mistress was also the fault of my master, Mr. Song. I wanted to make a paper man and resurrect my master's wife, but instead of resurrecting my master's wife, she resurrected a monster of unknown origin. Fortunately, this monster is quite trustworthy and has guarded Mr. Song for a long time. Otherwise, before he could become a disciple, Mr. Song would have been forcibly seduced away by a conspiracy. Besides, speaking of it, I still want to thank her. If she hadn't taken the empty box left by her master and lured away the strangers from Fenglelu, she might have been haunted by the people from Fenglelu. But why did this old woman come to this place? Seeing that everyone was gone, Gao Zhou popped up and saw Su Tong looking at those little girls in a trance. He couldn't help but laugh mischievously. "Why, are you feeling full of love?" Su Tong didn't explain, he just slapped his hand on Gao Zhou's butt, raised his eyelid slightly, and looked at Gao Zhou up and down with a squinting look. How about we make do with each other? I don't mind suffering a loss. Roll. Gao Zhou had goosebumps all over his body, and he almost used a weapon to smash the sleeping old man behind him. Seeing Gao Zhou's fearful look, Su Tong couldn't help but sigh and said, "Hey, you can't help but tease me." After saying that, he stood up, looking at the retreating figures of the group, and couldn't help but think in his heart, if this mistress is here, there is no guarantee that the people from Feng Lilu will not come. Speaking of Feng Lilu, Su Tong suddenly felt a chill in his heart. Whether in reality or in the script world, Feng Lilu made him feel very annoying. He betrayed the information several times, and each time he was made very passive. However, for such an enemy, he would not fight you openly, but would only hide in secret and stumble you. If the people from Feng Lilu really come, I should consider taking some time to go back to Luoyang City and imitate the master in the script world to calm down this ghost place. After the others had gone far, Su Tong and the others stopped camping here and moved to another place. During this period, the old man was still sleeping soundly. When he woke up, he would only find that the place had changed, so he asked Su Tong. That place was crowded and unsafe, so we moved to another place. A lot of people. The old man obviously caught the key words in Su's fairy tale. Yes, when you were sleeping, a group of people just passed by. There were quite a few people, and they all brought a big red coffin like you. Su Tong did not hide the matter, he told the truth, and at the same time he was observing the changes in the expression on the old man's face. Humph, don't worry about them. Without me, those people will never be able to find the secret of the Holy Land. The old man said confidently. Su Tong noticed that when the old man was talking, his hand would inadvertently wipe the silver horn on his waist. Old man, we've all reached this point, so don't choke and hide. What on earth is that Holy Land? The Yin-Yang cave we are looking for is not your Holy Land. Gao Zhou also tried to explain their purpose to the old man, and even took out the Lingling Yin and Yang Feng Shui diagram. But the old man glanced at the position on the Feng Shui map and sneered, "You are quite well prepared." The implication is that I still didn't believe them. Okay, then tell me why so many people are here and who are they? Su Tong saw that the explanation could not make sense, so he simply stopped letting Gao Zhou waste his words and just asked about the origins of the people he saw yesterday. Humph, they are all a group of thieves, not really people. When he mentioned those people going to the Holy Land, the old man was full of contempt. Only under Su Tong's gaze did he explain, they are all the heads of those families who want to enter the Holy Land just like you. After speaking, he couldn't help but sneer, but how do they know that they can enter the Holy Land? When Su Tong heard this, he couldn't help but think about it. Could it be that my cheap wife is also trying to get the attention of the Holy Land? Just as he was thinking about it, the old man looked around suspiciously, but did not see Chang Liuji's figure. He was worried that this guy might have lost his way, but Su Tong said with an indifferent expression, "Don't worry, I am brother is born with a dog nose, he will find you." The old man was doubtful about this. The depths of the mountains are no better than other places. Even if you hold a map, it will be dark when you enter the mountains. If there are no acquaintances to guide the way, many people will be trapped in this mountains for their entire lives. However, when night fell, Chang Liuji came out of the woods and saw this guy carrying 2 wild boars, without looking tired at all. Walking to the bonfire, he threw the wild boar on the ground and leaned against a tree nearby. He only glanced at Su Tong from time to time, like a poisonous snake that might rush up and bite you at any time. Gao Zhou felt uncomfortable all over. The old man walked to the wild boar carcass and took a closer look. He turned the carcass up and down and was surprised. There was not even a single scar on the 2 wild boars, but if you look closely, you will find that there is a hole in the eye of both wild boars. It shows that Chang Ji hunted these wild boars, all by piercing the wild boar's eyes with one move, and killing the wild boar directly. Although I don't know how Chang Wogu did it, I'm afraid no one I know can do it. The old man dragged his chimney, looked at Chang Wuhan, and then at Su Tong, not knowing what he was thinking about. At this time, Su Tong had already started to roast the pork on the bonfire with a knife. The old man thought that it would be impossible to finish the 2 wild boars, but before he could finish the pig trotters in his hands, the roast pork on the grill was already snatched away by Su Tong and the other 3, without even a single pigtail. The old man remains. After eating and drinking, the 4 of them rested early in the hut for the night. Su Tong slept soundly that night, but Gao Zhou's sleep was not so comfortable. On the one hand, it was the old man snoring. I wonder if the old man was old or had some respiratory disease. The snoring sound was extremely loud. You could just say that he was snoring loudly, but as he snored, there was suddenly no sound, as if he was suddenly stuck. Gao Zhou was so frightened that he trembled and woke up instantly. Fortunately, this jam only lasted for a few seconds before the deafening snoring resumed. On the other hand, it was also because of the old man that after he was suddenly awakened, what made him even more horrified was that he inadvertently discovered that Chang Wuju was not sleeping and was lying on the haystack behind them. The bloody eyes were staring at Su Tong's back without moving. That resentful and sinister look in the dark night was more like a poisonous snake waiting for an opportunity to strike. No matter who it is, who can bear it? Therefore, Gao Zhou was destined to have a restless sleep that night, so that when he was on the way in the morning, he seemed a little dazed and walked absent-mindedly. "Boss, if you have a grudge against this kid, we might as well kill him now." Gao Zhou leaned on his arm and whispered to Su Tong. Thinking of the look in this guy's eyes last night, I felt uncomfortable. "Don't worry, he doesn't dare to fight with us." Su Tong patted Gao Zhou on the shoulder with a smile. Although this guy was like a beast when he was crazy, a beast also had a brain, otherwise why would he drop the screwdriver to remind him? Right now, he was the only one who could check and balance the old man. Without him as a threat, the old man would truly have the power of life and death in his hands. So now, even if Chang Wuhan wants to cut himself into pieces, he still has to wait until the old man removes the poison from his body. Gao Zhou thought about this. But when he asked Su Tong about the deep hatred between him and Chang Wuhan, Su Tong just smiled mysteriously and said, "A small operation." After saying that, he didn't give Gao Zhou a chance to ask any more questions and walked forward quickly. After the 4 people climbed over a hill along the route, the surrounding air began to become colder. You can see some dilapidated statues and steps carved into the stone on the road, which seemed to indicate that there were traces of human life here. At this time, Su Tong noticed that there were bullet holes in some stone statues. That's what was left from the bandit eradication back then. Seeing Su Tong staring at the bullet holes, the old man stepped forward and explained to him. "When I went into the mountains to suppress bandits, I don't know how many people died. It is said that the bandits have a stronghold with 5 steps and a post with 3 steps. Coupled with the complex environment here, it is easy to defend but difficult to attack. It is also difficult to transport artillery. Every time they capture a place, they will cause huge casualties. It was not until those bandits retreated to Black Wind Mountain that they were unable to retreat and were all annihilated." While they were talking, a ruins appeared in front of the 4 of them. Even though only broken walls were left in the ruins, it was still possible to see how glorious this place once was. Gao Zhou picked up a piece of wood casually, put it under the bridge of his nose and smelled it gently. He was surprised for a moment and said, "Go ahead, this is the best Nan Muo." Because of his hobby of collecting coffins, Gao Zhou is also very sensitive to wood. Looking at the wood fragments scattered on the ground, it can be said that they are everywhere. I can't help but be a little surprised. Is this village all made of Nan Muo? This is too luxurious. It's rare but strange. This is just the gate of the village. There are a few houses on the back hill. If the houses have not been destroyed, they should still be there now. They are made of you. The old man sneered from the side. Gao Zhou's eyes widened when he heard this, and he thought about whether he should dismantle some and take them away. Wouldn't it be nice to go back and make a coffin? Wild ewes are now under national protection. But for a wealthy family that has stood in this land for thousands of years, it is really not a rare thing. Uncle, you are so familiar with this place. Did your family live here before? Gao Zhou asked tentatively. He didn't know the origin of the old man, but he once heard his old man say that there used to be such a chieftain family in the 100,000 mountains that had been passed down for thousands of years. It was a truly wealthy family, and all the Miao people did not dare to disobey the family's orders. It was called a country within a country. But I don't know what happened later. A fire caused the family to disappear without a trace. It is said that he was attacked by bandits, and some said he was punished by the gods. In short, from then on, few people mentioned this family. Seeing that the old man was so familiar with this place, Gao Zhou couldn't help but doubt the old man's true identity. The old man lowered his head and did not explain. He just put his rough palm on the stone pillar in front of him and groped about 1 meter down the stone pillar. He could find a deep scratch. Even though more than half a century had passed, when the old man touched this scratch, he could still clearly think of his father in his mind, who was bigger than him when he scratched a knife mark on the stone. The remarks. Azai, you have grown taller again. From now on, my father will cut you on this stone every year. When one day you grow this tall, you will be the master of our family. Okay, then I will become the patron saint of our family like my father. The words of that year echoed clearly in my mind at this moment. But the knife mark that measured the height stayed at this height forever. Thinking that the old man's eyes were slightly red as if there was sand in them, he wiped them with his sleeves a few times before saying to Su Tong and the others, "Let's go." After passing here, there is Black Wind Mountain behind. At the foot of Black Wind Mountain, a group of people were sitting under a tree, warming themselves by the fire and eating dry food. He still couldn't help complaining, "What are we doing here? We are really suffering. If I had known it was so difficult in the mountains, I shouldn't have come. This will make you feel uncomfortable. Let me tell you, it's winter. If you go to the mountains in summer, hey, the mosquitoes in the mountains alone are enough for you to drink a pot." Mentioning these bugs in the mountains, everyone couldn't help but feel terrified. Although the Miao people gave them deworming medicine, the medicine was not 100% effective. Last night, someone was bitten by an unknown insect while sleeping. As a result, early the next morning, the person had turned into a pool of thick blood. Thinking about that scene, I felt a cold feeling in the collar on the back of my neck. I inevitably felt a little regretful, but it was too late to regret now. A man gnawed on the biscuit in his hand and said in an envious tone, "Hey, I envy those who were not selected by those seedlings. They should have withdrawn from Xiangzi by now. Why don't you evacuate and wait to die? So many of our people have died recently. Last time, 7 people died and were discovered by the police before they had time to collect their bodies. Now there is a big fuss. If I hadn't had a murder case on me, I would have evacuated long ago. Why should I follow you into the mountains?" As soon as the murder was reported, all the major exits and expressways were subject to various inquiries. Only the road into the mountain had no police, so those with criminal records had no choice but to go into the mountain. It's not that the information given by Feng Lelu was inaccurate. It said that someone was in Jishao. Who knew that so many natives suddenly appeared in Jishao? You said that boy named Su Tong is really capable. So many natives are protecting him. We can only watch helplessly as this god of wealth stands there, no one dares to make a move. Several people were talking to each other, and suddenly one person raised his head and said, "Someone is here again." Several people looked back and saw 4 figures. A huge red coffin appeared in their sight. They were eating sesame seed cakes in their mouths, but they didn't take it seriously. However, suddenly someone rubbed his eyes and stared at the face of one of them carefully, and then the cake in his hand fell to the ground. The god of wealth is here himself. Sorry, I seem to have caught a cold today and feel uncomfortable. I originally planned to ask for leave, but I thought that the 31st of this month is my daughter's birthday. If I want to ask for leave on the 31st, I don't dare to ask for leave. I can only write a chapter and post it first. Sorry. Sorry. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shuigan Xiao. Chapter 471. Hefeng Mountain is not tall or majestic in the 100,000 mountains. Except for the legend about the Black Wind, this place is almost useless, with poor mountains and rivers. But when people climb the mountain, they will find that it has been shrouded in mist all year round, and the mountain is so cold that even if the sun shines on them, it will feel cold. An old gentleman from Jinzimen walked up the ridge and looked at the mountains and forests in front of him. He already had the intention of retreating in his heart. There is such a strong evil spirit. This place is an unusual place. There are dangerous peaks intertwined. It is so fierce and evil. It looks like a ghost mountain, it's not like a holy place. I heard that when they went into the mountain to suppress bandits, 3,000 bandits gathered here and refused to surrender. In the end, they even killed all the villagers and children they had kidnapped. So many people were buried here. It's natural to have a lot of resentment. Next to the old gentleman, a young man wearing glasses was chatting. He had obviously done some homework before going up the mountain. Everyone looked at the young man and saw that his demeanor was light. Although he looked a little delicate, his movements did not appear stingy. Especially his eyes, which were clear and bright. Looking at the equipment on his body, it was clear that this young man was not from a wealthy family. That's expensive. Seeing this, the old gentleman couldn't help but hesitate for a moment, and raised his hand to the young man. Thuja is watching the river, and the sparks are scorching the ground. One kick in the door, one kick in the door. Little brother, what are you choosing? Can you give me some advice? The old gentleman's words rhymed quite a bit, so the young man naturally understood clearly. The first 2 sentences were about self-declaration of family status, and the 5 elements were short of gold, so they started with gold. 1 foot in the door and 1 foot outside. His surname is Li. When choosing Wan'er, you ask yourself who the master's name is. Although the young man understood what he was saying, he didn't travel around the world, so he didn't make any slanderous remarks to the old man. He said bluntly, I was just passing by and came here to see clearly. Hearing this, several people present looked a little unkindly. Especially the old Mr. Jinzimen named Li was losing his face. When I tell you my family status at my age, I am flattering you, but when you pass me by in an understatement, you are slapping someone in the face. He immediately tapped his toes calmly, and a cool breeze blew over him. Anyone with a discerning eye could feel that the aura around him began to change. Young man, you have to see clearly, but you have confused us. As the old man spoke, he reached out and patted the young man on the shoulder. Patting on the shoulder is a taboo in the world. What's more, there was a green light on the old man's fingertips, which was obviously not a good thing. However, the young man did not dodge and allowed the old man to pat his shoulder. He looked at the old gentleman with a smile on his face and said, Senior, you are pretending to be confused because you understand. The old gentleman was startled and looked at his hand blankly. After looking carefully, he found that his palm had stopped at a distance less than a finger's gap from the young man's shoulder. It's not that he wants to stop, it's just that he can't take the shot with this hand. This. The old man's face changed greatly, but he heard the young man laugh and said, "Old man, Mr. Chuzhou, the commander-in-chief of Jindian in those days, passed down 3 sentences. One of them was, luck can be changed, but fate cannot be violated. What is the last sentence? You remember?" The old gentleman's body was shaken violently. His eyes were as wide as bells as he stared at the young man and exclaimed, "Don't rush the good news." After saying that, he hurriedly let go, but it was too late. The young man shook his shoulders, and the old man's hand hanging on his shoulder immediately opened 2 holes, as if his hand had been pricked by something invisible. It hurt so much. The old gentleman had bulging veins on his forehead and kept backing away, covering his hands. When the few people who were with the old gentleman saw this, their faces turned cold and they were about to take action, but the old gentleman hurriedly stopped them, and then bowed deeply to the young man and said, "You are so reckless, little old man." He, the young man grinned, raised his head and continued walking forward. After the young man left, other people gathered around and asked the old gentleman what was going on. The old gentleman wiped off the blood on his hands, and when he saw this, he quickly told everyone to lower their voices and whispered, "That guy is from Plum Blossom Village, let's not mess with him." Plum Blossom Village. Everyone was horrified, and for a moment they all had huge emotions in their hearts, and they didn't dare to say any more words. It seems that these 3 words are particularly taboo. The group of people hurriedly continued climbing the mountain, but after taking just 2 steps, they heard a burst of hurried footsteps behind them. When they looked back, they saw a person rushing from the bottom of the mountain. Seeing that this man had an unusual look on his face, someone stopped him and asked what was going on. But the other party refused to stop and just said, "The God of Wealth is here." After that, he continued to run forward. God of Wealth. Several people looked at each other, not knowing who the God of Wealth was. I saw a group of people behind them carrying a coffin up the mountain. These people were the same people who were eating cakes at the bottom of the mountain. Now they were carrying the big red coffin and climbing up the mountain with bruises and bruises. On top of the coffin, a chair was placed, with a young man sitting on it, his legs crossed, looking leisurely and contented. "It's him." When they saw the young man's face clearly, the old gentleman and the others were suddenly shocked. They recognized at a glance that the person sitting on the coffin was none other than the God of Wealth they were looking for, Su Tong. As the saying goes, there is no place to be found if you step through iron shoes, and it takes no effort to get it. For a moment, several people looked at the figure on the chair. It was like a golden mountain placed on it. But before they could take action, the old gentleman looked sideways and quickly reached out to grab his companions. "Don't move. Something's wrong." Everyone knew the origin of the old gentleman. Although he was not the commander-in-chief of Jindian, his seniority was quite high. Strictly speaking, Master Chuzhou, who had been dead for many years, and him could be regarded as brothers in the same sect. Seeing him stopping them, they all looked sideways for a moment. "Don't do anything. The 4 people carrying the coffin are the same ones who were at the bottom of the mountain just now. From the look of them, it doesn't look like they are taking advantage." When the old gentleman said this, other people saw that it was not true. The 4 people had bruises and swollen faces. If the old gentleman hadn't reminded them, they wouldn't have been able to recognize them. Taking the one who just ran away with him, the 5 of them are collectively known as the 5 ghosts of Xiangzi. They are good at ghost arts and can be regarded as powerful strangers. But at this moment, 4 of them can only carry the coffin honestly. After the 4 people saw them, they were stunned for a moment, and then quickly lowered their heads, as if they were afraid of being recognized. Speaking of which, they were also unlucky. When they saw Su Tong Hao, they were so happy that they even stopped eating the pancakes and rushed forward, ready to chop him down. According to the information given by Feng Lelu, This boy has only been a disciple for a few months, and he was a patient who escaped from a lunatic asylum a few months ago. Who would take a mentally ill person to heart? However, after they rushed over, they discovered that things were completely different from what they thought. Su Tong didn't even make a move when a dark shadow rushed towards him. It was none other than Gao Zhou. Gao Zhou's attack was quite measured and he didn't kill them, but with a random punch, he knocked 5 people to the ground and rubbed them. The 5 ghosts of Xiangzi are almost the same as the tofu dregs of Xiangzi. In comparison, in the previous script world, the rookies who had practiced boxing in the martial arts gym for 3 years were better than them. As for the skeleton magic they released, it could only deal with ordinary people like the old man. Facing Gao Zhou, it shattered one with one punch and had no effect at all. After the fight, Gao Zhou did not kill them, but simply asked about the situation. Only after asking this question did they know, good guys, it turns out that things are more complicated than they thought. 3 months ago, Feng Lilu dispatched 30 people to swarm into western Hunan. In the same month, there were rumors in the world that a mysterious force had surfaced in western Hunan, and 30 people from Feng Lilu disappeared overnight. No one knows who this mysterious force is, and even Feng Lilu has not been able to find out the origin of the other party. Soon, 4 top experts from Feng Li Tower entered Hunan, but soon there was no news about the 4 of them. It was suspected that they had been poisoned by the mysterious force again. 1 month later, Feng Lilu issued a wanted order all over the world. The maximum reward amount is 5 million, plus one of the 24 ancient martial arts books collected by Feng Lilu over the years, and a Linglong pill. It is said that this pill can avoid 3 disadvantages and 5 deficiencies. Disadvantages: instantly igniting the entire alien circle. A large number of strangers began to pour into Xiangzi, not only for the 5 million, but the 24 classics and an exquisite pill were enough to make many strangers want to move in their hearts. And all this is just for one person, Su Tong. To put it simply, no one in the world knows this guy's name, and no one in the alien world has heard of it. Even his master was a little-known figure. When many people got the information, they immediately wondered whether this kid had blown up Feng Lilu's toilet, allowing Feng Lilu to kill him at all costs. But wait until they look down and take a look at this boy's master's door. Luoyang Kimen, studied under Shuigui. After seeing these 8 words, most people understood it. Even if they didn't understand, a little inquiry could tell what kind of nightmare the 2 words Shuigui were in the hearts of the older generation. Even some seniors want to take action, not for Feng Lilu's reward, but just to kill Shuigui's disciple and bring bad breath to their own sect. However, after most people entered Hunan, before they had time to take action, 7 murders occurred on the streets. It doesn't matter who killed these 7 people, but the bodies were just thrown on the ground, which didn't alert the authorities. In a small city like Jishao, 7 people died on the streets. This was a big case and it became a hot search topic. As a result, there are now searches everywhere in Jishao, and some unlucky ones with criminal records were immediately arrested. Even without a criminal record, it is difficult to explain why so many people suddenly flocked to Xiangzi. In short, the official action was faster than they imagined. At this time, a group of Miao people came to the door and invited them into the mountain to participate in their 44-year-old sacred ceremony. Everyone who participates in the divine sacrifice will receive a generous gift, but the prerequisite is that the safety of the Miao clan leaders must be protected. It's a good time. It's good to go into the mountains to hide. By the way, you can also see the magical power of the legendary seedlings with witchcraft. Of course, at this juncture, if something like this suddenly happened, it would be false to say that we didn't doubt it. But since we have come here, it doesn't matter if we have to venture into the dragon's pond and the tiger's den. As a result, most of the strangers who were originally chasing Su Tong went up the mountain, and the rest happened just like at this moment. The 5 Xiangzi ghosts who wanted to eat crabs were the first to be pinned to the ground and rubbed by the crabs. Su Tong and Gao Zhou were also surprised. The two of them always thought that after they hid in the Gao family, Feng Lelu should give up. But Feng Lelu has been sending people here. They don't know that it's because someone helped them stop them. But, who has been secretly helping them? Su Tong and Gao Zhou were confused as to who was helping them. And as far as Gao Zhou knew, it was unusual for Xiangzi to have such powerful people. Although the Gao family had some power, they would never be able to reach this level. The two of them didn't think too much about this. Since so many masters are on the mountain now, Su Tong also wants to see how many masters of unique skills are left in the world since the master's blood-stained Bamang. So one of the 5 ghosts in western Hunan was sent up the mountain to report the news, and the remaining 4 were just enough to carry the coffin for them. He moved out a small stool and sat on the coffin, trying to settle the old scores between Chi Men and these strangers in the world. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 472. There is a village halfway up Black Wind Mountain. It was the stockade left by that group of bandits back then. Although the village is abandoned, you can still vaguely see tables, chairs, and benches, and some pavilions built against the cliffs. Now after so many years, the village is now lively again. Among them are mature Miao people wearing Miao clothes, as well as strangers in simple clothes. Of course, the most eye-catching ones are those with veils on their heads and standing some distance away from everyone. These young men were wearing veils, so their faces could not be seen clearly, but judging from their figures, it was not difficult to tell that most of them were women. Behind them they all carried a bright red coffin. Everyone gathered at this place, called Black Wind Cliff. Below the cliff was a bottomless pool. The sunlight shone on the pool, but not even a single ray of light was refracted. The entire pool was pitch black, like thick ink. It is said that the black wind in the Black Wind Mountain legend blows out of this pool, but at this moment, no one can see how the so-called black wind blows out of the water. While everyone was still discussing in low voices how the young women would start worshipping the gods later, a person suddenly ran up in a panic. "Here he comes, he comes." Everyone ignored it and continued to talk about their own things. Seeing no response, the man suddenly became impatient, stepped forward and grabbed one person and said, he's coming, he's right behind." Everyone looked back at him and recognized him as the third of the 5 ghosts in western Hunan, but they were baffled by his words and didn't know what stimulated this guy. "He's coming. Go kill him quickly, he's right behind." The third child was pushed around in the crowd until he was suddenly hit on the chest by a hand and fell to the ground. The embarrassed appearance made everyone around him burst into laughter. But the third child didn't care about this. Seeing that no one in front of him took him seriously, his face turned red with anxiety. He took a breath of energy in his chest and shouted, "Shut up." The sound echoed in the valley, and all sounds suddenly stopped. A pair of unkind eyes stared at the third child's face. Among them were some of the most notorious figures in the world, with impatient expressions still showing on their faces, but the third child didn't care. When he saw everyone was quiet, he said loudly, "He's here, he. I don't know if he was too nervous, but the third child actually forgot Su Tong's name in his mind. He slapped his head hard and couldn't think of it for a long time. When everyone's eyes became more and more unkind, and some people even put their hands on the hilt of their own swords, the third child finally took his hand out of his pocket, opened the photo on his phone, pointed to Su Tong's photo on it and said, "He, the god of wealth, he's coming up." Hearing this, everyone was startled. A middle-aged man next to the third child stepped forward and pulled up the collar of the third child and asked sharply, "Who are you talking about? Is it Su Tong who went up the mountain?" Hearing this name, the third child finally turned around and nodded repeatedly, yes, it's Su Tong. Su Tong has gone up the mountain and will be there in a moment." Suddenly everyone roared and started talking. To say that so many people gathered in Xiangzi this time, it was all thanks to one person, Shuigoi's disciple, Su Tong. Boy, are you sure? If I find out you lied to me, be careful I kill your whole family. Someone asked Lao San. Everyone knows that Su Tong is protected by the Gao family, and the Gao family is also protected by a mysterious force. As long as Su Tong does not leave Xiangzi, it will not be easy to touch him. But now someone is actually saying that this guy ran up on his own. Isn't this a fantasy? But the third child nodded vigorously and stood up and said to everyone, really, it's really him. We just met him at the foot of the mountain. There is a master beside him. We are not opponents. So you ran up the mountain to report the news? The middle-aged man continued to ask. However, this sentence made the third child feel embarrassed. He hesitated for a while before lowering his head and said in a small voice, no, he let me go up the mountain and asked me to bring you a message. When everyone heard this, they couldn't help but look at each other. An old man pinched his beard and sneered, hey, you are really not afraid of death when you meet the king of hell. What kind of message is that? The old man who spoke was named Zhou Hun. He was from a famous family. He studied under Mount Wutai. He was a veritable old-timer in the world. He has a biological uncle named Zhou Yaozheng, who was also born in Wutai Mountain. He practiced Buddhism and Taoism, and his strength in starting a new business is no less than that of a half-step master. But he went to Bamang and never came back. Now he doesn't know where he is buried. This was also the reason why he came to western Hunan. Since he could not find his uncle's grave, he wanted to pay for it with the life of Shuigoi's disciple. Therefore, at this moment, his eyes were shining brightly, and the whisk in his hand was filled with murderous intent. The third child swallowed and spit. Under the gaze of everyone, he felt a lot of pressure. He couldn't help but regret why he said such nonsense. But after everyone commented, it was no longer possible not to say anything. He could only say in a small voice, he said. What did he say? Hurry up and say it. The middle-aged man standing next to the third child was obviously a hot-tempered man. Seeing the grumbling look on the third child, he wanted to chop this guy with a knife right now. The third child was frightened by him and did not dare to hesitate anymore. He gritted his teeth and said, he said that his master has already paid the debt of Kimen with his life, but if anyone thinks it is not enough, he will punch him until the other party says it is enough. In an instant, everyone present fell silent. There was a strangeness in everyone's expressions, and they didn't know whether to laugh or be angry. But the faces of several old people among them were already terrifyingly ferocious. Pa! This little bastard, how dare you be so arrogant? Zhou Hun's face was red with anger, and he waved the dust fly in his hand, causing a strong wind to blow on the ground. Where is this kid? I swear to cut him into pieces. Immeasurable Heavenly Lord, I'm afraid it's not enough to cut his body into thousands of pieces. The poor Taoist Xiao Yuzai wants to use the oil of his corpse to make wax, his human skin to make a lamp, and his bones to be nailed under the locust tree. He will be a slave and a maid for 7 lives? The Taoist who spoke had a ruthless look in his eyes, and many people present felt a chill in their hearts when they heard the words. This is to make people doomed to a life of misery for 7 lifetimes after death. Haha, forget it, do you want him to have another life? I'll take out his soul, light a soul lamp, and make him disappear in this life. The so-called soul lantern is similar to the principle of lighting a sky lantern, except that the sky lantern burns nothing more than a stinky skin bag, while the soul lantern is to pull out the person's soul, use his hair as a wick, and rub the soul in. Then use his corpse oil to make lamp oil. After lighting it, it will not burn out for a long time. The soul will be tortured day and night until the oil is exhausted and the lamp will wither and disappear. This is a harmful magic. No, wouldn't this be an advantage for him? He should be tortured. After breaking up his soul, he should be cut off from one soul to another. Let the master who went to the underworld to find him complain properly. Let the old man Shwegoi know that there is nothing that can be done to him, but it can make him cut off his descendants and leave no one to follow him. When everyone heard this, they thought this was a good idea. If one soul and 4 souls were cut off, even if they were reincarnated in the future, they would be destined to be crippled and mentally retarded at birth. The most important thing is that compared to other forms of torture, this method can also disgust Shwegoi. It is really wonderful to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. This was originally a Miao people's sacred ceremony, but before the ceremony even started, the protagonist inexplicably turned into someone else. This made several Shen Miao leaders sitting in the distance start to murmur. They obviously didn't know who this person named Su Tong was. Just by listening to their joking accents, it is not difficult to tell that some of them are still in their prime. So many people want to kill him, and he still dares to come. I think he must be a hero under the veil. The woman's voice was as clear as a bell, and when she spoke, there was a hint of sweet fragrance in the surrounding air. After saying this, another woman on the side smiled and said, "I heard them say that this man is not very old. If he is really a hero, he might as well help." "Humph, are you trying to help someone? I'm embarrassed to point you out." The Miao girls became more and more aggressive as they talked. They couldn't help but look forward to seeing whether the young man who dared to make such bold statements really dared to go up the mountain. At this moment, a Miao girl quietly walked out, stood beside the Miao leaders and said coldly, "The high priest sent a message that she would come to preside over the ceremony in person later, saying that there would be an old man this time. Members of the master's family are participating in the divine sacrifice, so we should be careful." Upon hearing that the high priest was delivering the message, the several Miao leaders who had been chatting animatedly immediately became serious and solemn, and nodded to express their understanding. But the Miao girl hadn't finished speaking yet, but her next words were in the Miao language that few people speak anymore. Except for these leaders, even the few who followed them could understand it. The Miao girl could only listen with a partial understanding. "Coming." At this time, someone didn't know who yelled, and the whole valley fell silent instantly. Everyone stared in the direction of the entrance and waited quietly. As time passed by, everyone's brows moved slightly, and they could hear the sound of heavy footsteps and heavy breathing. I saw 4 people with heads swollen like pig heads, slowly walking from the other side of the cliff carrying a big red coffin. Few people can recognize that these 4 are the other 4 of the 5 ghosts of Western Hunan, but it doesn't matter if they recognize them, because at this moment, everyone's attention is focused on the coffin and the young man. Just after I finished typing, I saw Brother Chiu say Merry Christmas. Before I could reply, he hit me in the face with a big silver bullet. "Thank you, Brother Chiu. The 3rd update will start tomorrow. Lasts until the end of the month. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 473. The sun shines on the young man's face. His clear features and deep eye sockets reveal an indescribable agility. Facing the gaze of the heroes, the corners of his mouth are slightly raised, showing contempt for the self-confidence of others in this world. He is even more arrogant and contemptuous of the heroes. In an instant, a 70-year-old man's fingers trembled and he almost fell to the ground. It's so similar. This old man is called Li Kanglei, and he is also an old man in the world. When he was young, he followed his grandfather to Bamang and witnessed the bloody battle that year. The young man in front of him may look very different from Shwegoi. But the energy in his body, the unparalleled look in the world, are exactly the same as Shwegoi's. In an instant, the old man almost blurted out Shwegoi's name. Everyone's eyes were attracted to the young man in front of them, so much so that the 3 people behind the coffin were ignored as if they were nothing. The old man next to Gao Zhou felt a little unhappy when he saw this, because he was obviously the protagonist of this divine sacrifice. But when he saw the eyes around him that wanted to cut Su Tong into pieces, he wisely chose to hide behind and shut up. He is Su Tong. Even if I have seen Su Tong's photo on Feng Lelu's information, the photo is just a photo and cannot completely preserve a person's look. When they really saw this person, the confidence that came from within was like a natural sense of oppression, which surprised everyone. However, he is indeed an ordinary person. On the abandoned balcony, the eyelids of the young man from Plum Blossom Village moved slightly, and a light blue light appeared in his pupils, reflecting Su Tong's figure. He just looked at it carefully for a moment and then frowned. It was similar to the information in the information. He was just an ordinary person. Even if he has obtained the inheritance of the seven sects, it is impossible for him to have any real abilities in such a short period of time. Thinking of the unhappy expression on this young man's face, he thought he could watch the fun, but he didn't expect it to be so boring. If he hadn't still been looking forward to the Miao people's divine sacrifice, he would have left now. The young man was not the only one who was looking at him, everyone present was looking at the young man in front of him. But no matter how they looked, they couldn't tell what was special about Su Tong. He was just an ordinary person. You knew we were here and you still dared to come. How brave you are. Several people around him were already walking towards Su Tong. Seeing these people surrounding them, Gao Zhou felt unhappy. He rushed out from behind, stood in front of the coffin and shouted sternly, "Get out!" A tiger's roar was as loud as thunder, and the entire valley seemed to tremble with the sound. The few people walking in front were immediately shocked by the sharp shouts and their chests felt tight, and they hurriedly stepped back. At this time, everyone remembered what Lao San had just said, saying that there were experts protecting Su Tong. No wonder this kid dared to go up the mountain. It turned out that he had someone to rely on. It's just that although everyone present is surprised, they are not afraid. After all, there is strength in numbers, so it doesn't matter if they are experts, they are not without them. Su Tong, since you are here, don't hide behind others, stand up, and let's settle the score. Old man Johan shouted from afar. The voice was as loud as a bell, and it was no worse than Gao Zhou's scolding just now. Would you like me to come? Gao Zhou took a step back, stood beside the coffin and whispered to Su Tong. To deal with these little miscellaneous fish, Su Tong didn't need to take action at all. His half-step master was enough to make these people shut up obediently. On the other hand, after all, Su Tong is still the leader of their team, and Xiangzi is the old territory of the Gao family. He should stand up and let these people understand that the Gao family has not yet fallen to the point of being bullied by them. But Su Tong rejected him. He jumped off the coffin, patted Gao Zhou on the shoulder and said, "This is the cause and effect of the Tiazi section naturally. I, the person doing the talking, will bear the responsibility. This is my cause and effect, and it is also my practice. You step aside first and let me do it." When Gao Zhou heard this, he immediately thought about it, and without saying a word, he looked back at the old man and said, "Let's go, we have nothing to do anymore." The old man originally wanted to ask what was going on and why this young man attracted so much hatred, but then he thought about it and ignored it. He strode out from behind and glanced at the seedling leaders in the distance. He sneered and motioned for the 5 ghosts from Xiangzi to follow him carrying the coffin. After all, the 5 ghosts of Xiangzi were still afraid of Gao Zhou. Seeing that Gao Zhou had left, they were surprised that Gao Zhou didn't protect Su Tong, but they followed him anyway. Chang Wuhan followed at the end. When he walked to Su Tong, he glanced at Su Tong, holding his precious screwdriver in one hand, and said with a half smile, "If they can't beat them, I will kill them. I'll kill you first." Su Tong said with a smile, "Then you will be disappointed. There are many ways to die, but they are not among my considerations." Snort. Chang Wugu snorted coldly, We'll see. After saying that, he followed the old man and others and left together. Seeing that the master who was protecting Su Tong left, everyone looked at each other, becoming more and more confused as to what this kid was up to. But after thinking about it, I was relieved. The information said that this kid was mentally ill. Could it be that he was having a mental illness at this moment? Su Tong raised his head and looked around at everyone. Ever since he solved the problem of the Sun family's ringer class, he felt an inexplicable sense of relief. At that time, he knew that he had inherited this lineage and had implicitly carried this responsibility on his shoulders. This is the so-called cause and effect, which cannot be seen or touched, and even one's own life icon cannot capture its traces. But it is there, in the heart. Therefore, he did not allow Gao Zhou to interfere. Only when he personally stood up and put an end to what happened back then could the cause and effect that weighed on their seven sects truly end. Su Tong walked down and looked at everyone's faces. Then he raised his hands seriously. This move obviously made several old people present feel like they were facing a powerful enemy, and they even stepped back involuntarily. Even though Shuigui has been dead for so many years, the evil spell that once brought nightmares to everyone is still difficult for seniors like them to let go of, and has even become a lingering nightmare in their hearts. However, this is not a Shankao worship, but a very simple hand-raising ceremony. Su Tong, a descendant of the Taizi sect, pays homage to all the seniors. The hands are clasped in fists, holding a bell in the hand, and the thumb is pointing up, which is the Kimen hand salute. And the reason for holding the bell this time is to prove his identity. The identity of the current seven-door talker is enough weight. Is there no one in Kimen now? Let a mentally ill man come out to talk things over? Or are you really addicted to acting and think you are a Shuigui? The origin of the speaker was unknown, but he was the middle-aged man who held the third child by his collar. As soon as he said this, everyone smiled. Feng Lelu revealed Su Tong's background. He was a mentally ill man who escaped from the hospital. He had severe paranoia and especially liked to play roles that were other people's identities. It is not difficult to understand the meaning of the middle-aged man's words. Before his death, Mr. Song regarded a mentally ill person as his successor and asked him to take over the blood feud that the seven sects owed them. Young man, please wake up now. Kneel down and cut off your fingers to swear an oath to give up the 7 inheritances. I can guarantee that you will leave safely. When an old man saw Su Tong's information, he felt compassion and wanted to give Su Tong a way to survive. But as soon as he said this, he was opposed by everyone. Zhou Hun, in particular, glared at the old man angrily. As a common man from the Sun family in Handan, if you want to protect someone, you are worthy of it. No one can do it today. Immeasurable Heavenly Lord, Sun Donor has the heart of a bodhisattva, but even if the Tathagata comes in person today, he can't save him, the Taoist who had previously threatened to kill Su Tong for 7 lifetimes said coldly. Suddenly, there was a burst of verbal abuse around him, which made the old man look ugly and wanted to be fair. After all, this was just a lunatic. He had only been a member of the Seven sect for a few months. To let such a person bear the debt of the Seven sect? There seems to be some suspicion of indiscriminate killing of innocent people. It was just a matter of public opinion, and no one here cared whether he was innocent or not, whether he was really here for revenge or a stranger who came to kill Su Tong's head. They would get nothing if they let Su Tong go, but Feng Lelu's reward would be real. Su Tong waved to the old man named Sun to express his thanks, then waved his hand to signal everyone to be quiet, and then walked to the edge of the cliff alone. He first glanced at the pitch-black water pool at his feet, and thought to himself, is the yin-yang cave down here? The smile on his face became brighter and brighter, and he showed his neat white teeth and said to the people in front of him, ahem, seniors, do I have to die today to be able to pay both debts? Hee, boy, even if you say something fancy today, I will still twist your head off. Zhou Hun shouted sharply. That's right, you are Shuigoi's disciple. If you don't die today, we will have trouble sleeping and eating. Su Tong nodded seriously, that's right. As he spoke, Su Tong raised one hand on his chest and said to everyone, then let's go together, I'm in a hurry. What did you say? After Johan and others heard this, they felt that this kid might have gone crazy. I saw the middle-aged man rushing towards Su Tong with a vigorous step, his big hand opened, and with a strong wind, it hit Su Tong's chest like a devastation, and he laughed even more, ha 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 ha, I will kill you alone, that's enough. The whistling palm wind carried a pungent smell of iron rust. The big man looked rough, but the skin of his hands was white, tender and delicate. Anyone who knew the goods could recognize it at a glance. These were the iron sand palms that people in the world were afraid of. It is said that this kung fu can not only open stone tablets, but also specialize in internal martial arts, killing people invisible. After practicing to the extreme, the old skin on the palms recedes, and the palms are as tender as spring bamboo shoots. If you hit the tofu with one palm, the tofu will not stop. It's broken, but it can crack the table under the tofu. It's so strong and damaging that it's hard to guard against. Faced with such a fierce palm, Su Tong's smile remained unchanged and he faced it with one hand without any changes in his moves. Only one word. Quick. In everyone's sight, they only saw Su Tong raising his palm, but before they could see clearly how the slap came up, they saw that the slap had already hit the big man's face. Snapped. The big man, who was about 1.8 meters tall, was knocked upside down by a sudden blow to his body. He fell to the ground and died instantly. When he looked again, he was bleeding from all the holes and was unconscious. Su Tong stepped on the big man's body, lowered his head and looked around, debts will be wiped out after death, next one. After saying that, he kicked the big man's body off the cliff. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 474. Plop. With the sound of corpses hitting the water, everyone woke up as if from a dream. He stared at the pool under the cliff with wide eyes. The pool was as dark as ink. The body fell into it and sank into the water very quickly. Not even a trace of blood was seen. If it weren't for the waves still surging on the water, everyone would wonder if they were hallucinating. It takes 2 years to refine the iron sand palm, 2 years to roast the grain, 3 years to roast the chestnuts, and 5 years to roast the sand. It will take at least 20 years to become as good as that man. Of course, you need to learn boxing and palm techniques, and practice hard day by day. Combined with numerous medications. Once the palm technique is perfected, it will be a real killing machine. There are few people present who dare to say that they can take this palm forcefully. But for such a master to be slapped to death, this is too shocking and unacceptable. What makes it even more difficult for them to accept is that Feng Lelu's information is completely different from the Su Tong in front of them. Aren't you just starting out a few months ago? What about the mental illness you mentioned? I slapped an expert to death, and you tell me he was a rookie? For a moment, everyone was silent, no one spoke, and they didn't even dare to express their anger. Everyone was paying attention nervously. A woman in the crowd stared at Su Tong intently, her big watery eyes shining brightly. Secretly thinking in a low voice in his heart, could this old guy have something up his sleeve? Good. The young man squatting in the corner stood up excitedly, clenched his hands into fists, and stared at Su Tong intently, as if he was just watching the excitement and didn't think it was a big deal. If we want to work together, let's settle the accounts today. After today, all the accounts of my 7 families will be written off. Su Tong put his hands behind his back and looked at Johan and the other old men with an expressionless face. He knew that these old bones who were about to enter the coffin came to this place definitely not for the reward of Feng Lelu, but for his own project. On the head. For a moment, the people standing around Su Tong were trembling with chills, trembling and retreating. They were really frightened. Why, are the seniors not planning to come to me to settle accounts? Or, they suddenly discovered that your family's accounts are not that important. As soon as these words came out, everyone felt their teeth itching with hatred. These words were too damaging. Feng Lelu is too bad. This guy has such solid basic skills. It seems like he has been practicing since he was a child. The Taoist next to Johan couldn't help but curse when he saw this. Johan glanced sideways at the Taoist, snorted coldly, disdained to talk to the Taoist, strolled forward, and was about to speak. But I saw someone taking the lead. I come. The person walked through the crowd and ran straight towards Su Tong, carrying a long gun behind him. His back shook, and the long gun flew up from the holster, and he was holding it in his hand. It's the little spear king, Wu Zheng. Someone saw the black spear and immediately recognized the person's origin. At that time, Hebei's spear king Wu Xiaocheng was famous in Hebei. At Bamang Mountain, Wu Xiaocheng lost to Shuigui and was hit by a palm to smash the Tianling cap. From then on, the spear king fell and the Wu family's overlord spear was lost. The Wu Zheng in front of him was Wu Xiaokeng's youngest son. Although he had not learned the overlord spear, his pear blossom marksmanship was unparalleled in the martial arts world. Wu Zheng had been waiting for an unknown number of years for the blood feud. He originally had no intention of taking action after meeting Su Tong. He felt that it was too shameful to kill an ordinary person who had no strength to restrain himself. But seeing that Su Tong was not an ordinary person, and there was no psychological burden at all when he took action, Wu Zheng rushed towards Su Tong without saying a word, raised his hand and stabbed him out with one shot. The gun made a sonorous sound, and there was a strong energy surrounding the gun tip, which shocked everyone's hearts. In this era where half-step masters are rare, those who can practice such a spear have already surpassed Wu Xiaocheng, the former spear king. Seeing this, Su Tong raised his hand and used his five-animal grasping hand, facing the gun body to grab it with his big hand. Court death. Seeing that Su Tong dared to reach out to grab the gun head, Wu Zhenggu's eyes widened. With a flick of his wrist, the sky was full of gun shadows. However, as soon as he said it, Su Tong's stretched out palm seemed to be unchanging and firm. Ignoring those dazzling shadows, he actually grabbed the head of the gun. Wu Zheng was startled and subconsciously wanted to thrust forward with force, but at this moment, Su Tong's fingertips twisted slightly. Click. With the sound of breaking, Su Tong moved his arm forward, and the sub-black gun head was reflected in Wu Zheng's pupils. Puff. Bloody light bloomed, and a shrill scream was heard, making everyone tremble. Wu Zheng was seen holding a headless spear in his hand, standing there with the head of the spear inserted into his chest, looking at Su Tong himself with an expression of disbelief. All debts will be cleared after death, next one. Su Tong had no expression on his face, raised his hand and slapped Wu Zheng off the cliff. Plop, water splashed. At this moment, there was silence, and everyone was sweating. They did not expect that the young spear king Wu Zheng had not even gone through a round before he encountered such an end. Su Tong did not wait any longer and began to walk toward the crowd. Seeing Su Tong approaching, everyone unconsciously made way for them. At this time, a middle-aged man saw Su Tong's back exposed in front of him, and suddenly stabbed a dagger straight into Su Tong's back. The knife was sharp and fast, but Su Tong seemed to have eyes on the back of his head. Before the dagger could strike, he turned around and hit the man's chest with his fist. For a moment, everyone could actually hear the sound of bones breaking. Looking again, the man had fallen to the ground, vomiting blood and not breathing. Su Tong walked up to the body and kicked the body off the cliff with his toes. Blood rained down, and the body flew straight into the pool, but the angle was not very good. His head first hit a raised rock below, and then a large amount of blood spattered on the rock before he fell into the pool. This was a very unseemly way to die, but no one dared to object to it. Su Tong continued to move forward, and everyone could only make way. It wasn't until Su Tong came to Johan and several other old people that he stopped and said, "Old men, do you want to continue settling the accounts?" Su Tong's voice was very soft, but every word carried a strong sense of oppression. That condescending look made Johan and others' blood stagnate. "Kimen, Shwegui." Johan gritted his teeth and felt a storm in his heart. He was not shocked by Su Tong's strength, but felt unwilling because of Su Tong's strength. How could a person who had been dead for so many years still find such an outstanding successor? Shouldn't the sins committed by the Kimen mean that they will have no descendants? Johan calmed down and stared at Su Tong. "Look, you really look like your master Shwegui. Back in Buman Mountain, your master Shwegui went on a killing spree. My uncle Zhou Yaozheng and his disciples all died tragically. How dare I forget this account in your master's hands?" Zhou Yaozheng. Su Tong was startled. He still had some impression of the name. After thinking about it for a while, he remembered it. In the world of the script, his position was exposed and he was chased to the freight station by those strangers. Among them was a blind old man, Zhou Yaozheng. At that time, his apprentice killed him, but he used his big fat self-destruction to blow him up alive. Then the master came. Zhou Yaozheng was determined to take revenge, but the master sent him away directly. But in reality, Zhou Yaozheng and his apprentice died at the hands of their master. The master warned these people before going on a killing spree in Bamang Mountain, asking them to come down from the mountain. Anyone who doesn't come down from the mountain will be killed without mercy. It was they who refused to listen and were all killed in the end. It sounds like it's your own fault. Now that he heard that Johan was going to settle this account, Su Tong raised his eyebrows and said, "You are an elder, so you can figure it out." "Hey, boy, you are so crazy, even I want to see the methods of your 7 sects." Before Johan could speak, the Taoist from the side walked up, holding his beard, obviously planning to take action with Johan. But Johan obviously didn't want to get entangled with this Taoist. Hearing this, he did not speak, but distanced himself from the Taoist. This made the Taoist look a little embarrassed. Su Tong looked at the Taoist and could tell at a glance that this Taoist was not low in strength. He had a strong energy that never dissipated. Although he was not a master, he already had the aura of a half-step master. "Are you here to settle accounts or settle accounts?" Su Tong asked with narrowed eyes. Who knew that the smile on the man's face was very vulgar, he pinched his beard and said, "Guess." The Taoist wanted to be clever and relieve the embarrassment of being avoided by Johan, but as soon as he finished speaking, Su Tong suddenly slapped him. This slap was so quick and urgent that by the time the Taoist noticed it, he was already close at hand. Scare. Although Su Tong was suspected of sneak attack, the Taoist did not expect that the slap would come so quickly. In a hurry, a strong wind burst out from the Taoist's body, and a shining silver orb flew out from the sleeves of his robe. "Put a barrier in front of yourself." Magic weapon. Johan and other old people couldn't help but be shocked when they saw this. They didn't expect that this Taoist actually had the legendary magic weapon in his hand. The so-called magic weapon is a treasure that is produced by continuously refining the treasures of heaven and earth with unique methods. But this kind of thing has been extinct since the Ming dynasty. Now is the age of ending Dharma. The treasures of heaven, materials, and earth have long since disappeared and cannot be found at all. There may only be 1 or 2 among the great sects that have been passed down for thousands of years, such as Long Hushan and Quanzhen sect. I didn't expect that this Taoist could actually produce the legendary magic weapon. No wonder he was so confident. But what they didn't know was that this magic weapon was accidentally obtained by a Taoist who stole a Yuan dynasty tomb. It was almost damaged when I got it, and even after hiding it in my body for many years and constantly refining it, I couldn't fully recover it. At this time, Su Tong slapped him down, and the Taoist could only use this object to block it in a hurry. But what they didn't know was that when Su Tong slapped his palm, the power between reality and reality was already used in his palm. The so-called magic weapon in front of him, under the squeeze between reality and reality, not only failed to have a defensive effect, but also interrupted the connection with the Taoist and lost its power. Following this slap, the Taoist was severely slapped on the face under everyone's surprised gaze. Snapped. With a loud slap, the Taoist flew out immediately. Su Tonglang spat, "It's just a matter of killing people for money, and you want me to guess? Bah, what a joke." If the Taoist didn't report his origins, he obviously didn't come here for revenge. Since it wasn't revenge, it was for Feng Lelu's bounty. Su Tong still had to be polite to old guys like Johan and others. But when dealing with people like him who were looking for money to kill him, Su Tong didn't even bother to be polite and showed no mercy. The Taoist gave Su Tong a hard slap. Although he didn't die, half of his face was broken. He screamed in pain. When he got up, everyone took a look and saw that the Taoist's face was crooked. He already looked wretched, but now his mouth was crooked, which made him look even more funny. It caused everyone to laugh unconsciously, even if the sound was very low, but with so many people laughing together, the sound naturally couldn't be suppressed. For a moment, the crooked Taoist's eyes were red, staring at Su Tong like an enraged beast. He already hated Su Tong to the extreme in his heart. He just hated him, but he didn't dare to do it rashly again. The slap just now gave him an illusion. That strange feeling, as if some power suddenly interrupted the connection between myself and the magic weapon. This made Taoist Wei Zhui feel in a trance and think of the words that had disappeared, which was also a realm that he could not achieve. But that's what he thought, and he didn't really take it seriously. After all, in the age of ending law, it is impossible for a great master to appear again. At the moment, he couldn't figure out what was going on. Taoist Wei Zhui could only hide aside and did not dare to act rashly. Su Tong was too lazy to pay attention to this thing, and looked at Johan in front of him again. The annoying fly went away. "Old gentleman, do you still think this account can be settled? Calculate." Johan took a deep breath and walked up to Su Tong. The whisk in his hand shook, and the whisks gradually floated as if they had lost gravity. Following Johan's steps, the sound of a wave rose around him. There is no other water source in this place except the black pool under the cliff. How could there be waves? However, the sound of the waves was getting louder and louder at this moment. For a moment, several young girls sitting far away raised their heads and looked at Johan intently. Even in the thatched house not far away, there was a pair of eyelids slightly opened, with a solemn expression in his eyes. Half-step master. Gao Zhou, who was standing behind the old man, was the first to notice Zhou's aura. But there was no hint of worry in his words. As both half-step masters, Gao Zhou knew that half-step masters were not on the same level as grand masters, so there was nothing to worry about. Besides, this Johan's half-step master is obviously very talented. Sure enough, with Johan's breath surging, Su Tong also found that the blood in the old man was also evaporating rapidly. Originally, he was destined to live a long life, but now he suddenly lost all his energy. It seemed that some special method was used to force a breakthrough. "You shall be punished." Johan's eyeballs were filled with bloodshot eyes. Today, even if he risked his life, he still had to take away Shuigui, his disciple. Su Tong looked coldly and said, "After death, the debt will be wiped out, and the old man will be well off. Everyone, come together and kill this devil." At this time, the crowd behind was commotion, and someone shouted to start the rhythm. However, many people chose to watch, motionless, and did not dare to step forward. Su Tong's performance just now was so astonishing that most of the people were calmed down, and no one dared to act rashly. The people who really came forward were naturally those who had a blood feud with Kimon. These people gathered together and rushed towards Su Tong. Kill! With a long roar, Johan's breath was raised to the extreme, and he waved the whisk in his hand to sweep towards Su Tong's chest. In an instant, tens of thousands of silver threads covered the dust, turning into waves and silver flowers, and the scene of the stormy waves rising from the ground to cover the sky and cover the sun shocked everyone, and even screamed with excitement. But Su Tong was very calm. Instead of retreating, he walked towards the waves. What was even weirder was that when the overwhelming waves landed in front of Su Tong, he calmed down instantly and allowed him to walk on the waves. As he walked, he said, "Old man, when the truth is false, the false is also true. In the depth of inaction, there is something and nothing. What is false is ultimately false. It cannot be true." As he spoke, Su Tong raised his palm, held a thin paper knife between his fingers, and waved it towards the rough waves in front of him. Puff! In an instant, the waves dispersed before his eyes, and countless vaginal threads fell from the air like catkins. The whisk in Johan's hand was still held in the air, but the whisk had been cut in half. Also cut was the hair like blood stain between Johan's throat. Johan stared straight at Su Tong's fingers. When he saw the small paper blade on his fingers, everything became clear instantly. For a moment, his eyes were extremely complicated. Putting aside the information given by Feng Lelu, even if this guy is a peerless genius, he has become an insurmountable mountain at such a young age. Shuigui, you are so vicious. You have killed so many people, and now you want your disciple to kill you again. Even if I am a ghost, I will not let you go. Kill this kid together. Those who originally rushed towards Su Tong saw that Su Tong and Johan were not moving, and they actually wanted to take advantage of this moment to shoot Su Tong to death. Naturally, that Taoist with a crooked mouth was included among them. Facing the figures rushing behind him, Johan's eyes widened and his mouth opened wide, as if he was trying his best to tell them something. But the moment the blade cut across his throat, Su Tong's life had come to an end. I could only watch helplessly as they rushed forward to die. Su Tong looked sideways, looking at the angry faces. For a moment, he understood the master's mood when he was surrounded by so many strangers. There was no anger, no murderous intent, and the indifferent eyes only saw the scene of life passing by at the end. In a daze, Su Tong raised his hand slightly and bowed to everyone with both hands. "Thank you, Shankao." In an instant, whether it was the crooked Taoist or the strangers who wanted to take Su Tong's life, as Su Tong bowed down, the world in front of him instantly turned into darkness. How can it be? The young man hiding in the distance stood up suddenly and looked at the scene in front of him in horror. The dozen or so people who rushed in front died suddenly in an instant. Even the crooked Taoist fell to the ground dead with blood flowing from his 7 holes in an instant. Such a strange scene is exactly the same as the witchcraft recorded in the Jianghu. The 7 gates of Luoyang worship Shankao. But since Shuigui's death, this sorcery has long been lost. In the thatched house in the distance, an old woman opened her eyes shining with splendor. "Brother Shui has an heir." It was originally 2 chapters, but everyone said they wanted to finish it in one go, so I wrote this section in one go and posted it together. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 475. There was no scream, no pain, soulless corpses, and more than 10 people fell heavily to the ground like wheat that had been chopped off. Suddenly there was silence all around, no one dared to speak, they were all stunned by this scene. The man was still standing there, with his hands lowered, but in the eyes of everyone, he was no less terrifying than a demon. Even the leaders of Shen Miao in the distance stood up, frightened by the weird magic in front of them. It was just one move to kill more than 10 people. After so many years, this scene had already become a legend in history, but now it actually happened in front of him. The person who committed the murder was Su Tong, whom they ridiculed as the god of wealth. This huge contrast is like a dream. Aliu. In the crowd, someone swallowed hard and almost suffocated. The aura surrounding this man who looked like a god and a demon made people feel deep despair. Yes. It's you. It's you. He's alive, he's alive. A shrill scream woke everyone up. The voice sounded crazy and stupid, and Li Kanglei, who was already 70 years old, stumbled out of the crowd. Pointing at Su Tong with a trembling finger, he screamed with a trembling voice, "He is alive, he is alive." When Li Kanglei was young, he followed his grandfather to Bamang and witnessed the bloody battle that year. From that day on, the word Shuigui became a nightmare in my heart. From the moment he saw Su Tong, Li Kanglei had an illusion. If Shuigui is not dead, he will still be alive. Now that he saw the familiar scene reappearing in front of him, the frail spirit of this 70-year-old man finally couldn't hold it anymore, and he stumbled back. He looked like a madman and kept repeating the sentence, "He is still alive, still alive." Everyone watched the old man leave, with extremely complicated expressions on their faces. Su Tong looked very calm and did not say anything. Wherever his eyes swept, everyone present did not dare to look at him and lowered their heads involuntarily. Only a few people gritted their teeth. Although they didn't say anything, their eyes were full of despair. The scene just now made them feel deeply desperate. Their hearts were filled with 3 words, but they didn't dare or want to admit it. Grandmaster. Someone finally spoke and said the words that everyone least wanted to admit. Kimen, a small paper-making family, turned out to be 2 generations of masters. Shuigui, Shuigui, God really treats your family well. The size confirmed everyone's suspicions. For a moment, everyone felt an unprecedented sense of absurdity. A guy who escaped from a mental hospital became a Grand Master in just a few months. This speed is probably beyond the imagination of those sects that have been passed down for thousands of years. But what followed was despair like falling into an abyss. This guy, Chang Wazi, who was standing behind the old man, had a gloomy face and stared coldly at Su Tong's back. Instead of feeling desperate like ordinary people, his inner fighting spirit became even more fanatical. Everyone followed the direction of the voice and looked back, only to see that the speaker was the old man from the Sun family who had helped Su Tong intercede before. The old man from the Sun family came out with a cane in his hand, his face was bitter, and many wrinkles appeared on his face in an instant. The old man also wants to settle accounts. Su Tong slowed down his tone and looked at the old man's face. The old man of the Sun family admitted calmly, "Back then, your master killed my grandfather Sun Yashao, which caused our Sun family to ruin the inheritance of Kexi. After so many years, my Sun family dare not forget this hatred, and we will not forget it if you dare to pass it on. Please hold your hand high and let us forget about each other from now on." After the old man from the Sun family finished saying this, he looked at Su Tong intently. It was hard to believe that the young man in front of him was actually a great master. In the age of Dharma ending, even half-step masters were rare, but now a living great master was standing in front of him. What qualifications do I have to seek revenge against him? Even the next 3 generations of the Sun family do not have the ability to take revenge. Shocked in his heart, the old man of the Sun family even lamented that the luck of the Kimen was so terrible, and Shuigui's methods had reached the level of being able to play tricks on ghosts and gods. Obviously, the old man of the Sun family attributed Su Tong's strength to his master Shuigui. There are many miraculous and secret techniques in the world that can save people and teach them skills. It is probably Shuigui's retained backhand that created such a young master in such a short period of time. This can be considered a more reasonable explanation that everyone can accept. Facing Mr. Sun's gaze, Su Tong cupped his hands and bowed slightly towards the Sun family, as a tribute to the deceased. Seeing this, the old man from the Sun family finally let go of the pressure on his heart. After so many years, I am already about to be buried. Being able to pass this blood feud to the next generation before death is a blessing that I have cultivated in this life. Thank you. The old man from the Sun family held up his crutches and thanked Su Tong, then turned and left without looking back. Everyone, do you still have any accounts to settle? If so, come together. Su Tong said and looked at the old men on the other side. When Su Tong looked at them, they suddenly felt a biting coldness all over their bodies. After looking at each other, they let out a sigh. They knew that this was Su Tong giving them a chance. Regardless of whether they like it or not, they all have to give Su Tong an explanation. Just as the old man of the Sun family said, they dare not and cannot pass on this hatred, otherwise it will be a disaster for the family. So even if they felt sorry for their ancestors, they could only give in and walk up to Su Tong obediently. We are convinced. After hesitating for a moment, he finally said this. When the old people finished saying these words, the energy in their bodies suddenly collapsed. But so what, they have to accept it? There are 2 generations of masters in one sect, and there is still 1 generation in between. On this point, no one in the world dares to disobey. From today on, our family will withdraw from the world. Any family member involved in the grievances of the world will definitely die a good death. An old man took the lead in making an oath. Other old people also expressed their opinions. I have always said that the affairs of the Jianghu are the Jianghu, and the hatred of withdrawing from the Jianghu will end here. Su Tong didn't say anything more, he just made a gesture of respect with his hands and bowed to these old people to thank the deceased. This is the attitude he should take as a talker of the 7 sects, and it is also a summary of the end of the 7 sects of cause and effect. Invisibly, Su Tong vaguely felt something. The invisible and intangible feeling of depression in his body seemed to have disappeared a lot. At the same time, he even noticed that his cultivation level had also improved slightly. Even if it was not much, it was indeed still improving. No wonder. Su Tong understood as soon as he thought about it, no wonder why Taoist Dragon Seeker and the eldest princess both wanted to seize the dragon, but they still refused to do it themselves in the first place. Obviously, cause and effect, even if it is invisible or intangible, will not only affect your practice if it is pressed against you, but it will even begin to crush your own path and fruit due to the weight of cause and effect. Everyone saw these old seniors leaving one after another, their eyes were wandering, and they actually wanted to leave. After all, they came here to kill Su Tong, but who would have thought that Feng Lelu would screw them up this time? What just got discharged from the hospital with mental illness? How many months have you been studying under a teacher? In the eyes of most strangers, this is pure nonsense, and he is clearly a great master who pretends to be a pig and eats the tiger. I'm afraid all the masters in Feng Lai Tower were killed by this guy. Damn Feng Lai Tower, in order to avenge the masters they kept in captivity, he actually tricked them into killing people. If he went back, he would have to demolish Feng Lai Tower. Everyone became more and more angry as they thought about it, and they almost made up their minds to demolish Feng Lai Tower. Gao Zhou took advantage of this moment and trotted to Su Tong's side. Aren't you going to kill these people? According to Gao Zhou's understanding, none of these people can leave alive today. Su Tong rolled his eyes. I'm not a murderer. After saying that, he glanced meaningfully at Chang Wuhen, who was standing behind the old man. Chang Wuhen was staring at him with squinted eyes. Suddenly, Su Tong looked back. He felt guilty and quickly turned his head. Killing people is not Su Tong's pleasure, and it doesn't hit his G-spot. It's not unnecessary for Ruge. He won't kill old guys like Zhou Hun. But who allowed himself to play the role of the talker of the 7 sects just now? If he didn't kill these people to the point of fear and use thunderous means, When would the vengeance of one generation after another end? However, just as everyone was leaving, someone called the strangers who were about to leave. "Everyone, please wait." Everyone followed the sound and saw two young girls supporting a figure walking out of the thatched hut in the distance. When Su Tong and Gao Zhou saw this figure, they were both startled. Their eyes met and a thought came to their minds at the same time: Grand Master. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 476. How rare is a Grand Master? According to the eldest princess, before the Yuan dynasty, a carpenter with little spiritual practice had been playing with wood for 30 years, and he might have become a great master intentionally or unintentionally. After the Yuan dynasty, the number of great masters began to decline. By the time of the Datong dynasty, great masters had basically become exclusive to those sects that had been passed down for thousands of years. Until now, there is a steel city and a desert of lawlessness. The word Grand Master has become history. Let alone Grand Master, even half-step Grand Masters are rare, and they are all old bones like Zhou Hun. In the next generation, let alone half-step masters, you may not even be able to find a few who practice boxing seriously. If it weren't for this reason, how could those old guys quit the arena so easily? In the final analysis, the arena is still there, but times have changed. To be precise, it is not that they have withdrawn from the arena, but that the arena itself that belongs to them is almost finished. I just gave them a reason they couldn't refuse. After all, I was doing a good deed. Otherwise, so what if you lose your life? Are there too many revenge stories about traveling to famous mountains and learning skills from a master? However, Su Tong originally thought that he was already the brightest child in the audience. Not only Su Tong was surprised, but Gao Zhou was also a little surprised that another great master appeared. The two of them have made rapid progress, and that's because they have gained a lot of benefits in the script world. If a great master suddenly appeared in reality, the two of them would have to wonder whether the other party was also a player. If it's okay, if not, it's a bit scary. The person who walked out of the thatched house gradually revealed his face with the support of two young girls. What's disappointing is that the other person's face is wearing a strange mask, which completely blocks the entire face, and even the eyes are also blocked, giving no chance to observe the other person at all. High Priest. The Shenmiao clan chiefs stood up one after another, including the old man who came with Su Tong and the others. And judging from the solemn look on the old man's face, he seemed to have great respect for the high priest. When Su Tong tried to use the fate icon to see the opponent's destiny, he found strangely that the opponent's destiny could not be seen at all. Hey, just like Grandma Li, you can't see your destiny. Su Tong was surprised. Now there is something that Chi Men cannot see through? Thinking of Su Tong throwing 2 balls of incense and merit, he no longer believed in this evil. The merits of 2 groups of incense can be said to be at least 3,000. If this were an ordinary little god, the little immortal would be greedy for saliva, but Su Tong threw it out without blinking. As the incense and merits burned, the strange door turned in front of his eyes, and the world seemed to be opened like rice paper. Layer after layer the color was stripped away. Also stripped away was the haze above the head of the high priest. As the haze was swept away, what came into view was a huge golden-headed centipede. What destiny is this? Su Tong has never seen such a fate, so weird and strange. He only saw the centipede's golden head and 2 long beards twisting in the wind, as if he had discovered his own peeping. The long beards shook violently and let out a harsh buzzing sound. The high priest seemed to be aware of Su Tong's peak. Mask slowly turned his head and glanced at Su Tong, and then continued. Every 44 years, we have to come here to hold a divine sacrifice. You are all guests invited by me. Feel free to stay. After the divine sacrifice, those who participate in the divine sacrifice will be greatly thanked. After saying that, Several Miao leaders stood up with smiles and took the box from the attendant's hand. Then two of the boxes were opened and exposed to everyone. In an instant, everyone's eyes were straightened. Really or not, such a big ginseng couldn't have come from the wholesale market, right? Some people looked at the ginseng in the box and their jaws dropped. What is the origin of that bead? Why do I see something inside the bead, like a living fish? Some people stared at the black orb in another box with wide eyes. They saw that the orb was pitch black, but from time to time there was a silver light swimming around the orb, as if it was alive like a small fish. It's a pity that with so many people present, no one recognized the origin of this thing. The Yama pearl is a divine creation created by heaven. It is recorded in the chapter on the jade pearl in volume 10, paragraph 36. The pearl contains charming water, its color is like the water of ink, and it contains the energy of yin and yang. The earth dragon turns over and comes out with the water. It can be seen at night. The water condenses into frost, and when dropped into the eyes, it can cause fish eyes. While everyone was still wondering about the origin of this bead, they heard a loud recitation coming from the back corner. When I looked back, I saw a thin young man in sportswear walking out of the corner. As he walked, he explained to everyone. Tiangong Kaiwu mentioned this thing. It is said that this thing is made of yin and yang. It is squeezed out when the earth's veins move. When placed at night, it can condense a layer of water mist, and the water mist drips on the ground. Once the eyes are attached, they will have fish-like eyes and be able to see clearly in dark places underwater. Where did this kid come from? He can't be a player, right? Gao Zhou tilted his head and stared at the young man in front of him for a while. I don't know if it's the player Su Tong, but being able to recite such an unconventional book so fluently shows that it's not a waste of energy. After talking for a long time, it turned out to be eye drops. It made me happy in vain. Some people listened to the young man talking for a long time, and after thinking about it, they realized that this thing was useless. They could see things underwater, so why did they need this thing? Everyone thought it made sense when they heard it. Even if it was dark underwater, it would be a big deal to just get a flashlight. Anyway, modern technology is so advanced that this problem can always be solved. In response to this, the young man just smiled lightly and said without arguing, and looked at the large ginseng that everyone saw before. The reed bowl is thick at the top and thin at the bottom. There are stacked horizontal stripes on the shoulders, and the fibrous roots are winding and twisting like a dragon. It looks like a real 1,000-year-old ginseng. I have seen it in my grandfather's wine jar before. I didn't expect it. There is one bigger than that one, so today is an eye-opener. As soon as these words came out, everyone's eyes lit up. The real 1,000-year-old ginseng was a priceless treasure. The young man was very handsome, discerning, and knowledgeable, so the Miao leaders naturally paid special attention to him and opened the remaining boxes one after another. All of a sudden, it was like pearls and jewels, shining like clouds. Everyone was dazzled when they saw it. The young people commented one by one upon seeing this, and each one made everyone's heart beat faster and their mouths go dry. When talking about the inconspicuous copper bottle in the box at the back, the young man paused, looked at it carefully for a moment and then said, "Can you let me take a closer look?" The Miao tribe leader holding the box chuckled and waved to him with his slender fingers. The young man was not shy at all. He walked up to him openly and said something abrupt before taking the box from the other person's hand. However, when he was taking the box, the matriarch touched his little hand, and his face instantly turned red. I don't know how many people below were envious of this scene. Gao Zhou even smacked his mouth, and whispered in Su Tong's ear, "My dear, these little girls are so beautiful even if they cover their faces with veils, look at them, the figure, those little hands, ugh." Su Tong couldn't help but sneered when he heard this, "You go back and bring a veil to Feng Xia to try, or you will turn into a soft-footed shrimp overnight." Gao Zhou grinned innocently. He had to admit that although Feng Xia's face was not good looking, her figure was much hotter than those of the Miao clan chiefs. By the way, before we go out, have you seen Grandma Li? Su Tong suddenly remembered something and asked Gao Zhou. Mentioning Grandma Li, the smile on Gao Zhou's face suddenly fell. No, what does this old woman do to see her? Gao Zhou has no feeling of family at all towards Grandma Li, and it would not be an exaggeration to say that she is an enemy. Su Tong never asked why. After all, it was a family matter, and no matter how stubborn a brother was, it was hard for him to take the initiative to ask. At this moment, Su Tong couldn't ask any more questions, so he could only keep his doubts in his heart. This thing should be a magic weapon. After observing the copper bottle for a moment, the young man finally said firmly. As soon as these words came out, everyone suddenly became quiet. A complete magic weapon can be used as long as it is taken back and refined for a few months. It is a real treasure. Suddenly there was a commotion below. The magic weapon was so rare, almost an extinct product, and it was also a complete magic weapon. Who could not be moved by this? The exceptions are Su Tong and Gao Zhou. They have no feeling for so-called magic weapons. To be honest, Su Tong's bell is just one. The props in the prop card are all magic weapons if you take them out casually. But for the vast majority of aliens, this thing is like a magical weapon, which is crazy. Your Excellency has good eyesight. In front of the thatched cottage, the masked man who was revered as the high priest began to praise, but his words changed. It is rare for someone in Plum Blossom Village to be out and about in the mountains after so many years. Plum Blossom Village. Everyone was shocked when they heard these three words. When they looked at the young man, their faces were full of shock. Even Su Tong and Gao Zhou were surprised. If we consider those great sects with thousands of years of tradition in the world as first-class universities, such as 985, 211, Tsinghua and Peking University, then my Huazhuang belongs to a technical college like New Oriental and Langxiang Technical School. In the world of martial arts, there are many evil sects, most of which come from Plum Blossom Village. Take Su Tong's 7 Gates and Gao Zhou's corpse exorcism, for example, which were spread from Maihua Village. It is said that the profession of corpse stitcher also originated from Maihua Village. However, compared to New Oriental and Langxiang Technical School, my Huazhuang is a semi-open model. Not everyone can enter if they want to, nor can they come out if they want to. It was never involved in the affairs of the world. It was rumored that the people in Plum Blossom Village were very evil and they usually stayed away from them. Unexpectedly, this young man actually came from Maihua Village. Speaking of which, he, Su Tong and Gao Zhou have the same roots. The young man's identity was revealed, and he looked a little embarrassed for a moment. He could only say to the high priest, Meidu, a descendant of Miai's Huang, salutes my senior. When the Miao girls who were just surrounding the young man heard this name, they immediately stayed away. Obviously, even the Miao family who were good at using poisons had no idea about the word syphilis. Everyone wanted to laugh but didn't dare to. They could only suppress their smiles, but even if it was just a slight laugh, it would be difficult to hide it with so many people together. I don't know if the high priest was deliberately trying to hide his smile, so he could only say loudly, Everyone, the divine sacrifice will begin soon. As long as the clan leaders selected by you can successfully complete the clan sacrifice, they will be able to obtain the treasures in their hands. Even if you fail, you will still be given a big gift. You only have one chance, so everyone, hurry up. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 477. What do you think, Su Tong pulled Gao Zhou towards the old man and asked Gao Zhou's opinion while walking. It's hard to say. These seedlings are not in contact with the outside world. Who knows what's going on? Gao Zhou must be said to be a native of Xiangzi, but he is Han after all and has no understanding of the Miao people, especially their habits of growing seedlings. Therefore, we still don't know what happened to the divine sacrifice. That's not what Su Tong meant, don't you think it's too coincidental? I just think, isn't it too coincidental? How come we didn't offer sacrifices to the gods earlier and didn't offer sacrifices to the gods too late, but we just happened to catch up? Hi, it's a bit of a coincidence. Gao Zhou scratched his head. Su Tong didn't say it was okay, but when he did, he thought it was a bit of a coincidence. It's like everything is squeezed together. Fen Lelu issued a wanted order, which led to a large number of strangers entering Hunan. Immediately afterwards, a murder case broke out and 7 people were found dead on the streets. These strangers did not have time to attack the Gao family, so they had to avoid the limelight temporarily and were invited to participate. This divine sacrifice. But Su Tong and Gao Zhou also chose to go into the mountains at this juncture, just in time to catch up with everything. You mean? Gao Zhou looked at Su Tong. Just wait and see. We have no choice now. Look at the old man's calm demeanor. It's clear that he's got us. Su Tong didn't say any more and pointed to the old man sitting on the chair. Other Miao tribe leaders have begun to recruit as many people as possible for themselves, and some even did not hesitate to take out a few more treasures to increase their bargaining chips. But the old man is as steady as an old dog. Sitting there drinking tea, he chatted with Chang Wujia next to him about which of the Miao girls was the most beautiful, not caring whether anyone would choose to protect him. His leisurely appearance was exactly the same as that of the old man in the security room at the school entrance. After Su Tong reminded him, Gao Zhou remembered that the trouble in his stomach had not been solved yet, and slapped his forehead with one hand. When you say that, I really think it's a coincidence. Go away, you are obviously greedy. After the two of them said this, they walked up to the old man. The old man looked at Su Tong with squinted eyes, grinning to reveal black teeth full of wormholes, wishing he could laugh to the back of his head. Sure enough, when several Miao tribe chiefs saw Su Tong walking straight to the old man, they couldn't help showing disappointment on their faces, and their eyes when they looked at the old man were not very friendly. The old man has no idea what the so-called Grand Master is, and he is not a stranger. Just knowing one thing is enough. These 3 are indeed no ordinary people. After playing around, these 3 in my family are the most attractive. If I had any regrets, it would be that I couldn't let this kid eat my own poison. What's going on with this high priest? Su Tong leaned half on the coffin, looked at the high priest in the distance and asked the old man. We believe in witchcraft. Whenever there is a Dharma gathering, we have to ask someone from the sect to preside over it. The old man explained to them. Witchcraft, also called voodoo, is a truly ancient local sect in China. In terms of inheritance time, it is not even worse than Longhu Mountain, or even longer. Before Taoism became popular, witchcraft was the mainstream in the world. There are 4 levels of staff in the witchcraft religion: witches, mages, priests, and shamans. Women are witches and men are jinns. These are the most common employees in the witchcraft religion. They are responsible for some small activities in the village, praying for people, and helping people with medical treatment. Going up to the mages, basically among these seedlings, there are very few people who can truly master Gu and witchcraft. The old man himself can't be counted, because he is resting on his laurels, and the Gu mother is a leftover from the family back then. He knows how to use it, but he is still far from truly understanding the Gu technique. As for the sacrifices, there are only 6, and they rarely show up. Even the mages in the sect don't know what these 6 priests look like. One of the 6 priests is the high priest, who leads the religious affairs. Apart from the most powerful shaman, this high priest is the most powerful person in the religion. It can be seen that the status of a person who can become a high priest is very respected in the witchcraft religion. It's no wonder that although the old man scorned the Miao clan chiefs, he still maintained respect for the high priest. So this is Su Tong sat aside and nodded thoughtfully. But he couldn't help but think of what the 5 ghosts of Xiangzi said before. All the masters in Fenglelu were wiped out by people from an unknown organization, forcing Fenglelu to issue a wanted order. These thoughts flashed through Su Tong's mind before he could sort out the details. A man walked up to the old man. What to do? The old man raised his head and took a look. Isn't this do? The old man was quite impressed by this name. You must also be participating in the god's sacrifice, count me in. I don't have any treasure for you. There's no shortage. I have plenty at home, Meidu said, without waiting for the old man's consent, and handed over to Su Tong and Gao Zhuai. Let's join in the fun, and I'll ask you two to support me later. Gao Zhou was startled and looked at Su Tong unconsciously. Gao Zhou carefully looked at the descendant of Mai Hua village in front of him, and he was also full of curiosity about Mai Hua village. After all, it is also our own sect. While being curious, he couldn't help but look at Meidu's fate with his life icon. What surprised him was that Meidu had no destiny. Yes, it is even more mysterious than the high priest. It is still covered with mist after all, but this guy simply doesn't exist. There is nothing above his head and he can't see anything. Surprised, Su Tong stretched out his hand to Meidu and said, "You're welcome." My brother said this out of context, but, since it's not you and it's not the treasure, why bother to swim in this muddy water? When Meidu was appraising ginseng and inadvertently said that the ginseng he brewed at home was smaller than this, Su Tong knew that there was no shortage of treasures in Meidu's family. Although Su Tong didn't know what the so-called divine sacrifice was, it must have something to do with the yin-yang cave, which must be very dangerous, otherwise he wouldn't recruit these strangers as bodyguards with such fanfare. So he didn't know why Meidu wanted to join in. Wouldn't it be good to hide outside and watch the excitement? Hey. Facing Su Tong's inquiry, Meidu had no intention of hiding anything. He stepped forward and looked back and forth on Su Tong. Of course I'm here for you, but now it seems that I'm just being sentimental. We're already here anyway, so let's take a look at what senior brother can do. I think it's worthwhile for me to come all the way here. Heh, you're quite familiar with it. Chang Wuhan sneered on the side. When he said this, his eyes couldn't help but glance at Meidu's butt. Although Meidu was a man, his buttocks were round and curved. Chang Wuhan glanced at it twice and couldn't help but raise the corners of his mouth. Come with a good-natured smile. While they were talking, they saw the high priest reciting something in strange Miao language. Then he took out a small gourd from his sleeve, opened the stopper of the gourd, and a stream of green liquid poured in along the mouth of the gourd to the black pool below. To be honest, Blackwater Pool is at least as big as a football field, and if such a small bottle of liquid is spilled, it will be diluted very quickly. However, what surprised people was that after the liquid was sprinkled on it, the entire black pool turned into a green pool in just a short time. Everyone looked at the pool under the cliff involuntarily. Just when everyone was surprised that the liquid in the small gourd was so powerful, many black spots suddenly appeared on the water. There are more and more black spots, and no one can clearly see what they are. Only when the black spots gradually began to gather, someone finally exclaimed, "Is it a bug?" Yes, they were densely packed bugs, each one as big as a grain of rice, emerging from the water in increasing numbers. These bugs seemed to be very interested in the green liquid on the water surface, and soon covered the water surface, greedily sucking up the liquid. What kind of bugs are these bugs? Why haven't I seen them before? On the way up the mountain, many people have experienced the power of those strange insects in the mountains. but no one has ever heard of any bugs that usually lurk under the water. Wait a minute, look. The water has become clear. What is jaw-dropping is that as more and more bugs emerge from the water, the original black pool gradually turns into clear water. The crystal clear kind. But what makes people's hair stand on end is that when they see the scene under the pool, they can't help but shiver all over. A chill comes from the bottom of their hearts, making them feel uncomfortable all over. Even when a ray of breeze blew through their collars, they made them shake their clothes like frightened birds. It was as if he was afraid that some bugs would crawl on his clothes. The reason for this was precisely because there were large pieces of bones under the water, both human and animal. The most important thing was that they saw a white skeleton among them, wearing modern clothes. That was the corpse that Su Tong had kicked off the cliff and fell into the pool. It had been eaten until only a skeleton was left. Just when people were feeling horrified, they saw a corpse suddenly dropped from the air. Someone dropped the corpse of the person Su Tong had just killed off the cliff to verify their conjecture. However, the moment the corpse fell, the insect swarm seemed to notice something, and flew up with a boom, and instantly enveloped the corpse and engulfed it. In the blink of an eye, the body was completely devoured before it even touched the water, leaving only a few bones scattered in the pool. This is the third update, albeit a second late. We'll continue to update tomorrow. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 478. Plop, plop. The sound of bones falling on the water made everyone feel uncomfortable. Black wind. So this is the so-called Black Wind. Finally, someone remembered the rumors about Black Wind Mountain. It is said that every few years, Black Wind Mountain always blows up a black wind, leaving no bones behind wherever it passes. People just regarded it as a rumored story, and no one really took it to heart. It was only at this moment that I finally realized that the so-called black wind was not the wind, but these insects. Hiss. My dear, it's a good thing we didn't go into the water, otherwise we would have fallen into a bug's nest. Gao Zhou clenched his teeth, feeling scared in his heart. According to their original plan, they were going to dive directly into the yin-yang cave. If they really sneak in, there are so many bugs, they will still shed their skin even if they don't die. You said such important information, why didn't Master say hello to us? Thinking of this, Gao Zhou couldn't help but complain. It's hard to say. Master and your old man may not just dive in. Don't forget, it's written in the book that this pool will dry up several times every year. If the water source dries up, maybe these insects will fly away temporarily. At this time, the high priest dropped the second bottle of liquid. The difference from before was that the liquid this time was dark red, like blood, and instantly dyed the water surface completely red. The densely packed insects on the water surface immediately got into the water again, greedily sucking the red liquid. But what surprised everyone was that after these insects sucked up the red liquid, they quickly stopped moving and lay on the water as if they had completely lost their vitality. After a while, the entire pool was covered with a thick layer of insect carcasses. It's poison. Everyone looked up at the high priest, and couldn't help but wonder why the high priest did this. Since it's poisonous, you can just use it. Why bother with it first? Chang Wuge frowned and said. Obviously the high priest's method was not in line with Chang Wu's appetite. Chang Wuge's words seemed to be recognized by many people, who felt that this was just an unnecessary act of taking off his pants and farting. The old man curled his lips and glared at Chang Wuge fiercely. What do you know? If it is as simple as you said, how can the Holy Land be as simple as you think? Even though the old man himself didn't understand the art of poisonous insects, he was still very clear about these insects. After all, this place was once his family's back mountain. Although these bugs don't look good, they are the most terrifying thing in this mountain. Some people have also thought about catching them and training them into goo insects, but all failed without exception. These bugs cannot be tamed at all, and are extremely poisonous. There are countless people in Meow territory who are good at using poison, and there are very few people who can poison these little guys. The secret that can really kill these bugs is naturally in the hands of the high priest of voodoo. Fortunately, these bugs, for some unknown reason, only want to stay in the black water pool, and only occasionally run out and become a black wind to prey on them. But if you actively throw some animal carcasses in every few years, this situation will become less common. After the old man said this, everyone felt relieved. It may not be poisoning. Maydew looked at the body on the pool and thought for a moment before saying, I have read a book on poisons, and there is a passage written in it, which states that the most poisonous things in the world are all great remedies for tigers and wolves. A little more invisible to kill, a little less good fortune to save people, there is no antidote to make up for the invisible. So since this thing is not afraid of poison, maybe the thing thrown in is a tonic. Maydew's words surprised everyone. If you think about it carefully, this seems to be true. Just when everyone was still thinking about whether what the high priest threw in was poison or tonic, suddenly a large number of bubbles came out. Look, what is that? When everyone took a look, they were immediately frightened by the strange scene in front of them. They saw that the water level of the pool was dropping at a speed visible to the naked eye. What was even weirder was that some fine hairs appeared in the water. These hairs rolled up the corpses of the bugs in the water, and as the water level receded, they were dragged deep into the water and disappeared. Such a weird scene made even these strangers feel hairy all over. I'm not going, I want to go home. When a stranger saw this, he immediately wanted to retreat. There were already so many weird things in such a weird place before entering. There was no guarantee that there wouldn't be anything more dangerous inside. No matter how good those treasures are, they will always have their lives. Just enjoy it. As soon as this person's words came out, many people expressed their intention to leave intermittently. These people originally wanted to fish in the muddy waters of Hunan for the reward offered by Feng Lelu. Now the fish has turned into a shark that kills people. If they are allowed to enter the wolf's den, isn't it clear that their lives will be taken? Immediately, several people decisively turned around and wanted to leave. But as soon as he took 2 steps, the person suddenly fell to the ground unconscious. I saw a scorpion emerging from the man's clothes and slowly crawling onto the hand of a Meow girl. The girl picked up the scorpion and blocked their way. The girl seemed extremely weak, but when everyone lowered their heads, they saw countless poisonous scorpions emerging from under the girl's feet. Seeing this, everyone's expressions instantly turned ugly. Everyone, the divine sacrifice has begun. If you want to leave now, you have no choice but to stay alive, the high priest said. Bitch, what are you pretending to be? If I want to leave, no one can keep me. One person was cursing the high priest. His name was Longfei. He was also a famous thief in the world. He once climbed hundreds of meters high to steal with his bare hands. The police once dispatched 200 police officers to catch him. They rounded him up and finally watched him run away. I saw Longfei cursing, jumping up on the cliff at the same time, and then stepping on the cliff and flying away. Such attainments in Qinggong can be regarded as a unique skill in the martial arts today. But Su Tong and Gao Zhou could only shake their heads silently and mourned for this person. Sure enough, the high priest just flicked a stone with his finger, and everyone heard Longfei's scream, and blood burst out from his thigh. Then he fell off the cliff and fell into the pool on the spot. Ah, help, help me. As soon as Longfei fell into the pool, he immediately felt something wrapped around him. No matter how hard he struggled, it was of no avail. Instead, more and more things wrapped around him. After a few struggles, he was dragged into the water and gradually disappeared. Now everyone's expressions became even more horrified. They watched helplessly as Longfei's body disappeared into those thick hair, and the whole process didn't even take a minute. What exactly was under the pool? The more everyone thought about it, the more their scalps became numb. Even Su Tong and the others frowned. They didn't expect such weird things to exist in reality. I haven't heard this from my master, have I? Gao Zhou inevitably began to murmur in his heart, wondering if they had gone to the wrong place. Seeing how hard it was, someone immediately spoke. High Priest, my name is Song Dai Bei, and my father is Song Tianese, the Pope of the Northwest Shenxing Tao. If I can't go back, I'm afraid my father will come to look for me soon. If there is any misunderstanding, it will be bad. The Northwest has always been vast and sparsely populated, and there are many experts hiding there. Shenxing Dao is a small sect that has emerged in recent years. Although it is small, in reality, with the accumulation of the art of Shenxing, it has now penetrated. He entered the express delivery industry and became a leader in the industry with strong financial resources. Song Dai Bei came here this time just to gain experience and take the opportunity to make friends with strangers. However, he didn't want to be involved in this troublesome matter. It was too late to regret it. He could only move out of his father's generation and want to let go. The high priest had some scruples and let him go. Unexpectedly, the high priest did not accept this trick at all, but joked with a smile, in this case, Mr. Song must be careful when he goes in later. If there is a shortcoming, it will be really difficult to see each other again. As he was talking, he saw that the water on the lake below had completely receded. After the black water disappeared, a huge underground cave was exposed. If you look closely, the rocks below were layered one after another, as if they were steps that had been polished early. Go down, time is limited, 2 hours, if you can't come back, I'm afraid you won't be able to come back. As the high priest said, someone nearby lit 3 huge long incense sticks. This long incense stick was specially made and was as thick as an adult's calf. It took exactly 4 hours to burn them all. Let's go. The old man stood up impatiently and pulled Su Tong down the steps of the cliff on one side. Gao Zhou and Mei Du naturally followed closely. We are going too. The 5 ghosts of Xiangzi stood behind, already wanting to bury their heads in the soil. When they saw Chang Wuhan looking at them, they couldn't help but step back, obviously not wanting to go down with them. You don't have to go, I can just carry the coffin. Seeing this, Chang Wuju had a smile on his face and slowly put his hand into his pocket. The 5 ghosts of Xiangzi were relieved when they heard that they didn't have to follow them. Just when they were about to nod their thanks, a flash of scarlet passed through Chang Wuju's eyes. The next moment, a man suddenly rushed in front of the 5 people. He held the screwdriver in his hand and stabbed it out like lightning. The unpretentious screwdriver emitted a shimmer of silver in Chang's free hand, with an elegant and cruel arc, and aimed at the throat of the boss of the 5 ghosts in western Hunan with an indestructible edge. Before anyone even reacted, this guy had already started killing. His figure passed by the 5 ghosts of Xiangzi. Their faces were full of panic and disbelief, and they froze in place. After a while, blood spurted out from their throats, eyebrows, chests, and other vital parts. Blood spattered on Chang Wuhan's cheek, but Chang Wuhan didn't care. He just took out a white handkerchief from his arms, gently wiped the blood on the screwdriver carefully, and then said to the 5 corpses, "You're a waste, you don't deserve to be with me. There are 2 more updates tonight, but the 3rd update may be later."